listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God! Give away!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William. Joined today will be Derek.
I'm Batman.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we're discussing the Toxic Avenger.
The Atomic Avenger?
No, wait a minute. That's what Derek was calling it all week, the Toxic Avenger. The Toxic Crusader, the Troma film. And, because what was it? No, it is the Toxic Avenger.
Yeah.
I
He
call
was
it
calling it the Atomic Avenger.
Yeah, the Atomic
The
Avenger.
Atomic Avenger, okay. Well, I was thinking, too, there's the Toxic Crusaders was the cartoon
Yes,
show.
which-
And I was watching some of that yesterday.
Oh,
And,
where's that at? Is it on
YouTube.
Because I was wanting to actually watch some of that because I liked that a lot as a kid. I had like the action figure and stuff.
Yeah.
But instead, I actually watched the sequel too. Like after
Yeah.
watching the first, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of into Toxic Avenger. Like I'm in this mode now. Which you have to be in a mode to watch those films.
Let's see, because it was the Toxic Avenger was from 1984, and it was a Troma movie that very much was of the time. I think it was kind of like a cult hit or kind of ignored, and then it grew a following and got sequels.
Yeah,
and-
I think what I was reading that a lot of basically it came onto the scene mostly in 1986 because in 84 like it didn't do anything at the box office hardly, but it ran on like some Bleecker Street cinema, at, like
Yeah.
the midnight showings. But they even apparently had cut a bunch of it to be able to show it.
Yeah.
And then they restored it like in 2000. And I think after like a couple years when it hit video and started being on cable, that's when it like blew up kind of, or at least became a known property.
Well, and it's really crazy they made a Saturday morning cartoon out of that property, considering what's in those movies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because that was different. Because they had that RoboCop cartoon, I'm sure, and they had like
I don't remember RoboCop.
I know there was something RoboCop.
There was a
RoboCop
RoboCop
versus-
TV series.
TV series.
Yes, yeah.
But I just remember there's a bunch of RoboCop action figures.
Yes,
You had
RoboCop
Toxic-
versus Terminator, the video game for like Super. And
so you had
stuff.
all this stuff that was like marketed toward kids that had no
Well, you had a
business.
bunch. It's like the movie Aliens was rated R, and there was like an entire series of action figures aimed at kids with that.
I was at Great Escape, which is like, if you're not from Louisville, it's just kind of like a comic book toy store. And they had a whole bunch of the Aliens action figures. Like,
Yeah.
in the box. It was just kind of funny looking at them because you bring it up and it's like they were definitely marketed toward kids.
Well, I
They
was.
weren't-
What was I watching? Anyway, I watched Super Mario Brothers movie recently because I was working on like shooting an interview for somebody that's putting together a documentary, which is like the Super Mario Brothers movie archive website or whatever. Those guys are putting something together. But I don't know if I was reading something on it or watching something. I think I was reading something, and they were talking about how at the time people really didn't know how to make a lot of kids movies. Like that wasn't like a big genre. They would make like Labyrinth and stuff like that, which a lot of the kids movies would be really weird and kind of have adult stuff in there.
Yeah.
Like they didn't nail down that genre until like now it's like it is a
Clockwork.
Yeah, it is a clockwork. So I think probably that's why there was so many stuff like Toxic Crusaders and Aliens action figures and RoboCop action figures because there wasn't like a whole other industry of like trolls, you know what I mean? Emoji movie, like
Yeah.
Angry Birds, like stuff like that. Like,
well, like even
they were
in
finding anything to sell to kids because the movies were being made
and like
in service
those
of it.
And to be fair, like RoboCop looked cool and like
Yeah.
Predator and like all that stuff was cool. So of course, like kids were going to be interested in it.
even like Transformers the movie from the 80s, like the animated movie,
Yeah.
like they kill Optimus Prime.
Yeah,
And
it's
kids
like-
are like
it's-
bawling their eyes out in theaters.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we're making this shit for us. Kids can buy it. Kids can watch it and see the action figure.
Well, because like
the action figures,
until
but-
the creation of the PG-13, like all those delineations and ratings, until that existed, it was essentially just you were either rated R or like PG.
Yeah.
And then PG-13 came along to kind of help sort out like what's aimed at small children, what's aimed at young teens, what's aimed at adults.
Too, there was a talk recently about the remake of Toxic Avenger
Yeah.
with James Gunn attached or something. And
Well, I think that was all a bunch of nothing. Where he was initially attached, because I remember reading this on Dread Central. He was attached to the Toxic Avenger 5, but then they later walked it back and said actually he's not. But they just made it as an update on the original story. So
I could see them like kind of.
And two, I feel like that's a little above him now because he's like pretty heavily
below him.
Well,
Oh yeah, sorry, below him because he's pretty. like
he's very
Like,
busy.
I could see a remake, but Toxic Avenger 5 seems like a stretch. Like apparently they have a script written with that, but I also was reading that I think in 2010 they were wanting to do a PG-13 remake.
Yeah.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger was pinned, but he ended up backing out because he did Terminator Genesis. I don't know how true all that is, but
Yeah.
I could see this very much being something that people were going to try to get made into a PG-13 thing just because, they're making Rampage the movie. You know what I mean? Like anything like Toxic Avenger, that's at least a character. He's an identity, even though he might not be like a hugely known quantity. Like it is already a defined universe.
But if you could like get that movie made for I don't know like 20 million or something, and you could go make 100 out of it.
I mean,
That'd be
I would
pretty
love
good.
to see like the team that did like the Villainess or like Hardcore Henry, like do some like crazy in your face action. Like don't shoot it like a traditional cinematic. Like don't make it look like Transformers. Like you know what I mean? Like real cinematic. Like make it look like guerrilla style, but make it for like spend a little bit of money on it,
Yeah.
like enough to where it's not just direct to DVD.
Yeah. Or give him like this, or even Leach that directed Deadpool 2, like that did John Wick's.
Yeah.
He's done Atomic Blonde, somebody even like him.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you can get a crew that like is used to being guerrilla and make something cool with that. But
Well, I saw an interview with Lloyd Kaufman. I don't remember if he was talking about Toxic Avenger 5 or the remake. He said they wanted $100,000 to make it. And I think, regardless of...
it had been 5 because they made the first one, I think, for a little over $500,000. Or, I think it was $500,000.
So, I think you can make something today that looks similar for $100,000 just because of the way technology's progressed. But, we'll have to wait and see if they get a Toxic Avenger remake. Because they are trying to, everything is being remade. But at a certain point, some properties, I think, studios have been like,
Well, I guess a couple questions I have too is like, is there been a comic version of that movie? And if there is, who actually owns that? Does Troma or whatever?
Troma still owns it
Still
all.
owns it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was I think a novelization and different stuff.
Because I wonder,
but
'cause, a lot of
there
times,
was a
like-
Marvel comic series, but Troma owns it.
Yeah, okay. Because I was wondering if it'd be some weird thing where like they'd
far as I
own it
know.
and then it would end up being like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Netflix would make a series about it.
So, so before we get into discussing the Toxic Avenger, we'll also discuss some things you've been watching. So, all of us saw Deadpool 2 in theaters recently. So, that is, the way we're recording this, we didn't record one the weekend that it came out. But, so Deadpool 2, if you've seen the first Deadpool, well, I guess, too, like when you talk about these different superhero movies, a lot of people do go see them out of order. Because the other day, Julie, one of her friends, went and saw Infinity War, but hadn't seen a lot of different movies that led up to it.
But to be fair, like Infinity War, you really.
Well, first off, you have like an 18 movie universe. Deadpool, I do think you need to see the first one before you see the second one.
Yeah, I mean, it would help. I mean, the only thing you really, I guess, but it's not like a must. It would just be kind of weird seeing it without the other one.
I didn't remember hardly anything with the first one, and then stuff was popping up in this one. I'm like, oh yeah, he has cancer. Like, was that a thing? Like, I forgot so much about that first movie, but I only saw it once, like opening day or weekend or whatever.
Yeah,
but so like I really enjoyed it. I came out of the theater enjoying the time that I spent with it, wanting to see more like that character, that world, and it does point out like in the X-Men movies, the timeline of those movies makes no sense whatsoever. Because Ryan Reynolds appeared as Wade Wilson in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was set in the late 70s or 80s. But this version of Deadpool seems to be set sometime in like the present day.
with the same guy, the same actors. So.
But then the mainstream X-Men movies have progressed from the 1960s to the 1990s. But James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, all these actors have only aged like 5 years.
Well, you could
instead
get away
of
with
40.
Mystique, but you couldn't get away with Professor X Magneto.
But they're like, oh, we'll just give him a bald head or something at some point, and then that was make up for it. So, but the thing about Deadpool is it pokes fun at all of those inconsistencies and kind of does fourth wall breaking, kind of steps all around all those issues. So it kind of hand waves off all those things that don't make any sense.
But it feels right in that universe of that character.
Yeah.
He just, it's very open about it where it's like a lot of other stuff would probably try to sweep it or carry, and this just kind of points all that stuff out.
The main thing that I would say that the first Deadpool and the second Deadpool do, and the movie Kick-Ass did this as well, where you have a movie that's kind of doing a send-up of a lot of superhero tropes, and then by the third act, they rely on those same tropes to bring the movie to a conclusion.
Yeah.
And I think that's just because in a lot of those movies, if you get to the third act and there is just no fight, no battle, nothing, and it just ends, people are just going to be like, oh, that was terrible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you do have to have something happen. But the thing that I like the most about those Deadpool movies so far is, without really super, being spoilery about anything in the second one, it's just the stakes in these movies aren't the world is at stake and it's going to kill
it's always
the
been
entire
very,
planet.
Yeah, both of them have been very personal.
It's more limited stakes. And to me, that's more entertaining because seeing a blue light shooting into the sky that they have to stop before it blows up the planet can only be done, so many times before, or, like Suicide Squad, there's the Enchantress that's going to destroy the planet because there's this light in the sky and they have to get it's like, how many times can you do the same thing? And Avengers 1 did it, and all these movies do that same trope. So anything,
Infinity War is
Infinity
like
War
that.
was different. That was just somebody who's trying to collect all these things on a gauntlet.
But it's still like, it is one of those things where it's like every Marvel movie, and not just them, like DC's done it too with Justice League and all this crap. It is nice to have movies where it's just like, if like in Deadpool 1 or 2, if they didn't do what they wanted to do, then, and even in Logan, the rest of the world's still fine.
Well, because some of the Marvel movies, like Iron Man 1, was more personal stakes. Like Iron Man 3, like there's in like the Spider-Man Homecoming. So some of those movies don't have world altering stakes.
which is I think those are more enjoyable.
And Deadpool,
It's kind of eye rolling at some point when it's like every movie ever is the world's at stake, and it's like it shouldn't always have to be that.
but like Deadpool 2, they're like
Well, the thing about the world at stake stuff, like I'm fine with those movies. Like I like them when they work really well, but it gets weird when it is a movie universe and the world's at stake and like all these other superheroes aren't helping out.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That's when it's weird.
that's
Like,
when
so
it's
that's
weird.
why it's good for something like Deadpool when there are all the X-Men. Like, why aren't they showing up? Like, well, you can't make it like the stakes too high as far as, the stakes. The stakes should be high for the characters, but not high for the existence of the world. You know what I mean? Or the world shouldn't be at stake because then it's like, then it just feels contrived.
Well, it's kind of like Spider-Man Homecoming is a perfect analogy because we can kind of talk about that for a second where Tony Stark's like, the Avengers are here. You're going to work somewhere in there. And that's where like Deadpool kind of falls because he's not big enough to be in the X-Men, but he's like right there.
or if the X-Men show up, it's just like one or two of them.
Yeah,
not
it's kind
the
of
main
below.
ones.
Yeah, which is nice though because this is the best version of Colossus we've gotten and probably will ever get in this.
Well, I mean, it's also because they've actually given him devoted screen time and worked on that. But like Deadpool 2, like I laughed a lot in the theater during the course of it, and the audience did because the showing I was at was pretty close to sold out.
Yeah.
And throughout there was laughter continuously, way more than Solo because I saw that as well. And a lot of the jokes landed, and there's like some set pieces that tread a little bit of ground as the same as the first movie, but take it to a new level and make it even like funnier and grosser with some of the stuff they do.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the comedy in it, and the action in it was solid. And they increased the scope a little bit, but didn't make it too big. I think the budget was like $110 million.
And then I think one of the biggest things with the movie is that runtime is only like an hour 45. And for a sequel in a superhero genre, for it to only be an hour 45 and not, it just kind of, and it's great to me because it wasn't too long. A lot of these movies want to extend.
Yeah.
I had to break 2 hours.
It has to be because there's so many jokes in it. Like, you know what I mean? At a certain point, you don't want to watch this type of humor for 2.5 hours. Like, you know what I mean?
It wouldn't work. At some point, it would just be kind of like, even like in as great as Infinity War was, by the time you get to 2 hours and 30 minutes, you're kind of like, all right.
Well, I think a difference with that movie though is they have so many characters introduced. It's kind of just like different movies. But if you have like one character driving the action for the entirety
Making,
of it,
like,
that's gonna get
clips for 2 hours. Like
Something I like about this too is like Deadpool in this movie wasn't even the best character because I think Domino and Cable were both really well.
Well, I think too
really
they've
awesome
even
in it.
said like the goal is like for there to not be a Deadpool 3 in the future, but to be like a team up X Force movie or something.
Well, because I think what they were kind of either going to do a Deadpool 3 and take a break and do X Force, or do X Force and then do Deadpool 3. But to me personally, I think if you do X Force, just do 3 of these movies, and then you don't want to overstay your welcome.
Because Ryan Reynolds has said, if they did a third movie, they would need to lower the budget and make the stakes even lower and more personal.
Yeah.
Which I agree with that direction because how many times do we need to see New York City blow up or something like that?
Well, I think my favorite thing so far about this franchise, and this is only 2 movies in, is that Ryan Reynolds pretty much is running it. It doesn't seem like the studio is getting their hands to. Looks from everything I've read, it seems like they've given it to him, And like when it comes to like doing stuff with the movie, it's all around. It's not everybody else. It's not the studio doing
him
it.
having creative differences with the director of the first film is why they had a different director for the second film.
But to me, I kind of like that because it's like it feels like these movies to me feel a little more like almost like a passion project more so. Because like when you get into the MCU, even though there are really good movies, there definitely is like this is what's happening, this is what we're doing. Because look at Edgar Wright and Ant-Man, he didn't want to do what they want to do. He was gone. Mm-hmm. So that wouldn't happen. I'm not saying it wouldn't because they hate creative differences, but I like something where it's like, they're going to do what they want to do. They're not going to go too crazy with the studio, or they're probably just not going to do a movie. Because if Ryan Reynolds leaves, there is no Deadpool. Whereas
Never say that.
There wouldn't be one that anybody want to watch. It'd be like if Tony Stark or Robert Downey Jr. stepped down from Iron Man just because he didn't want to do it. You can't put somebody else in that role. You just can't do it. Nobody's not right now. Now, 10 years from now, maybe. But if Ryan Reynolds stepped down and didn't want to do anymore, they hired Joe White guy, whoever they got to do Han Solo. Like, I don't want to watch some boring dude. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't work.
Well, I think when you have people that where the actor is so closely linked to the character, you'd be hard pressed to recast a role like that and to not cause just most people to be turned off who are a fan of the portrayal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even like Han Solo where Harrison Ford is 70 something now and they're getting somebody who's in their 20s.
I mean, it could happen. I mean, look at Hellboy. It took a little while, but that could turn out good. You know what I mean? It's got a good director.
Well, but there's been a lot of time passed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like they could do one in like 8 years or something like that if they just stop making those films.
dude,
but right now, he is Deadpool.
I'm saying, but like if X-Force, Ryan Reynolds stepped down in 2 years from now, I'm talking 2 years from now, like Ryan Reynolds stepped out for the project because he didn't like where it was going and they got... I don't know who'd be like. They got Dane Cook to come in. Depp. Who wants to watch that?
I don't think Dane.
No, I'm trying to pick like the worst person I could pick.
Just cast Harrison Ford as Deadpool.
I would actually want to watch that. But the thing is, like,
because he wouldn't need to actually do the action. He could just be in the suit the whole time.
But the thing is, like, I almost feel like in this universe that could kind of work.
Yeah,
because he'd be like, I'm believing my stunt double is coming in. And you have a young guy in a suit. So I mean. But yeah, I really enjoyed Deadpool. It's one of those I've watched it twice, which I don't see a lot of movies in theaters twice. I usually will just obviously see them once. But it's weird because I saw opening night, and it was not a sold out crowd, and nobody was really engaged in it. But then when I saw it a week later, it was a completely sold out, and then it seemed like the audience is way more into it. So I don't really know what was up with that.
So sometimes you just get I don't know, sometimes you get weird audiences where they're not really the right audience for what they're seeing. And it's like, well, why did you see this then?
Yeah, I don't, because me and Courtney were talking about it when it was over. It's like the week later where it was sold out and everybody was actually, seemed like they enjoyed it. The first week was like, it was just so weird. Like it almost made the movie less enjoyable when nobody in there's
for sure. That's how comedies are. Yeah.
Well, I think too, like maybe you have people that are spillover from like, oh, we saw Infinity War last week, let's see this, and then not really be in tune with what the property is. But yeah, so no, Derek, like you really liked it. Yeah. I really liked it. So Sean,
I liked it, but I think it's probably like about the same wheelhouse as the first one for me. Like I don't know if I'll watch it again anytime soon.
Yeah.
And like I laughed through it, you know what I mean? But it was a lot of like, because it is like a lot of small, like tons of quips.
Yeah.
But also too, like I think it's very targeted towards like a specific audience. Like it is very much like I see why Derek like loves this so much because it is like so much X-Men humor, and you know what I mean? Like it is very much like riffing on comic book movies and everything. Like it is very zeroed in on that, and that's totally fine. You know what I mean? Like that's cool. Like that they made this movie like like for specific people. It's obviously still enjoyable, but like Nicole wanted to see it, but she actually fell asleep like twice during it.
Yeah.
But we also didn't get much sleep the night before because we have a kid, and our dogs are sick and stuff. But she also enjoyed it. She's like, yeah, I liked it. You know what I mean? But I did like it. But the only thing about it is as much humor that was in it, like I don't really remember walking away with any like huge laughs. Like, like Guardians, like I remember the Mary Poppins thing still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't remember any huge laughs from Deadpool. Like any big setups and payoffs. It was, instead of those, it was just a lot of like quips. You know what I mean? Which is fine.
Yeah.
But you know, I didn't get a lot of big belly laughs out
So
of this.
I think without spoiling anything, I'll just give a 2-word description of a scene: Basic Instinct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That scene had people in the theater laughing,
and
for a long
also
time.
like the smaller bit role for Black Tom Cassidy, like all that was really good.
Well, yeah, there's a lot.
I really enjoyed.
Yeah, like
I
well, I mean,
really
too. Though
enjoyed that.
the main thing to me that indicates like how much I relatively enjoy a TV show or movie is how much time do I spend after the movie ends looking things up or reading about things.
Yeah.
And after Deadpool 2, I did do a bit of reading just about, you know, a lot of the production stuff. Because I didn't, like, one thing I'll say is if you haven't seen Deadpool 2 and you want to, don't go to IMDb because it spoils stuff on the first page.
Yeah.
So don't go and read the cast listing because there are some unexpected things that pop up in the movie. So don't do yourself a disservice and spoil that. But like I, read up on stuff like that and read up on the different characters that were in it and what their plans were and, where it could go. As opposed to like Solo, I came out and just read up like on one thing that was in the movie. And then beyond that, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess something else too, like about Deadpool, that a lot of the Marvel movies, MCU've got, and even probably DC, is like I really enjoy just actual hand-to-hand fight scenes that aren't CGI.
Yeah.
And this one, like I don't want to give away any spoilers for certain scenes, but there actually was that, and they got they actually used Deadpool's abilities in a very creative way in those fight scenes. So I really enjoyed that because you don't see that.
Is his
much.
abilities basically just like healing?
Yeah.
That's what I thought of.
So
Yeah.
it's like healing and enhanced.
Because they don't really talk anything about Deadpool in this one. Like it is, everything's set up in the first one. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then like for me, like I was kind of foggy. I'm like, I think he just like super healing. Like obviously they show him do that in this film.
Yeah.
But I didn't think there was anything else.
Yeah,
I just
he essentially
really-
has like the same like healing abilities as Wolverine, but it doesn't have the adamantium
Yeah.
on the skeleton, kind of hampering it down.
Yeah.
some.
Yeah. And then he was like in the special forces.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why he's
But like there was one big CGI fight scene in it, which was fine with me. I really enjoyed that too because it wasn't like the focal point of the movie.
I mean,
but it just to me
Yeah.
it gets kind of disheartening. You watch all these superhero movies like Black Panther. The entire end fight scene was all CGI, and it's like there was really no hand to hand. And it's like
Well,
give me a little bit of hand to hand.
The final fight in that movie did seem to look rushed and didn't have the same impact as some of the earlier
Not
stuff.
now, like the earlier stuff in the tribe, that was great. But like when you get to these end stuff, it's like I do enjoy. That's why I liked Leach directing it because it's like maybe I hope I'm saying his name right because you get like some of that John Wick. You get a little bit of the Atomic Blonde energy where there's actually hand to hand fight stuff.
Yeah.
And some of it's very cool. Whereas a lot of superhero movies, even though they should technically be great, like when was like Captain America 2, you got to see a little bit of that.
Yeah, those guys have done some good stuff with Captain America and Winter
But,
Soldier.
yeah,
like that,
like Winter Soldier,
Yeah,
you got
like
some of
the hallways fight scene
Yeah.
stuff with.
But then you get to like Infinity War and even the first Avengers.
Well,
Well,
you
you
get a
fighting
lot
these
of-
aliens. Like, I don't want to see that. I want to see actual good hand to hand fighting and not a bunch
Derek,
of weapons.
not every movie is a Hong Kong action film.
No,
that's
but if
true.
you but you're
But it's
telling
all
me-
what Derek wants. You know what I mean?
No, but you're
So-
telling me if you got these like the world's greatest fighters and they never actually fist fight.
See,
it's
in
boring.
Alien Covenant, I really wanted to see more hand-to-hand fight between Michael Fassbender and himself. Like was on The Office where Jim convinced Dwight to beat himself up. Yeah. So he's like, well,
he's
the
like,
only
"You're the only
person
one that
that
can
can
do
stop me is me. And then he ends up punching himself in the crotch.
Yeah, but no, I enjoy that a little bit because it's something you don't see a lot.
So was there any other thoughts on that before I briefly discuss? So Solo,
not
the new
see
Star Wars
Solo.
movie.
I've watched Guardians of the Galaxy, so I'm good.
So it's a movie that I have Movie Pass, so I wasn't paying out of pocket to go see the movie. If it was something where I didn't have Movie Pass and I had to go pay, $10 a
American
ticket
dollars,
or
you
whatever,
wouldn't.
then I probably would have just waited a little bit. Because there's all the behind the scenes drama with the movie where the original directors got fired, and then they brought Ron Howard in to essentially reshoot about 70% of the movie, and there's all the kind of stuff like that. Which, for the most part, I was talking last night about like with Julie. It's like because of the internet and all the news, that's a big story and a big part of the movie's narrative. But Back to the Future, they recast the lead character and reshot almost the entire movie with Michael J. Fox. But just
Who is the original one?
Eric Stoltz.
I don't know who that is.
So since the
Mask.
news media wasn't the same then as it is now, that wasn't as big of a deal, and then nobody really knew that for the most part. It's not people who are like film nerds,
And it wasn't a
that
known.
stuff.
Back to the Future wasn't a known quantity
Yeah.
either.
So you have all that stuff. So with Solo, you have all the behind the scenes that make people think this can be like a disaster, and the movie's not a disaster. Like it's a competent, fun movie that there are some good parts of. It's just it's a backstory I really didn't care to see more of, and they don't really establish timelines in the movie, like how many years before A New Hope was this, or how many years after this movie was this. So there's points in the movie I'm like, well, how old are people supposed to be? And is Han Solo in the new movies? Is he in A New Hope? Is he supposed to be 50? Or like I don't know what these timelines are. So it's confusing.
Maybe they age different because they're in space.
But then you also have things like this isn't like the relationship with Chewbacca and Han Solo. You don't see as much of like the development of that as I thought you would. You see like the origins of it, but it doesn't. Without knowing how much time is supposed to have passed between this movie and A New Hope, it doesn't. I don't know. There's points of it. It's like I don't. And I'm not going to give any.
You don't have like a
spoilers
strong
for it.
understanding of the relationship and where things lay,
Well, and-
basically.
Yeah, I mean, like when you
You've
get
seen it, right?
No, I haven't seen
Oh,
it.
no,
you've
you,
seen it,
you
okay.
get the intro to like different characters and how they met in like Lando and stuff, but I think a lot of movies that show backstories, like in the X-Men series, like Magneto and Professor X are supposed to have worked together for decades and been great friends, where they had the falling out.
they never showed that.
But in X-Men First Class, they worked together for all of like maybe 3 weeks, and then they. So I think it does more of that, where you have all these relationships supposed to be super important, but it doesn't show you development because the movie.
It's like in the original backstory, they're able to like have a real history, but in the retellings, they're like, we actually can't show that because everybody wants these characters together now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want to
I
see the
think
movie
that-
of
yeah.
them together.
I think that-
So it's like they don't want to spend the time on.
Well, let me ask you this too, because this is something you were kind of talking before the podcast with stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy, specifically Star-Lord with Chris Pratt, because he's that kind of solo character. Then you even brought up like Wade Wilson from Deadpool. It's still kind of like that rogue kind of bad guy that will
does
do
the
the
good
right
thing at the end, but-
with movies like that, especially Guardians, because Guardians, like I think you're the one that said this is better Star Wars than Star Wars, or is it you? One of y'all have said that. I think it was.
I was
you.
talking about like it was more Star Wars
Yeah.
space opera than Star Wars is right now.
With having Guardians and having that character as Star-Lord, especially with a named actor like Chris Pratt in this movie with Joe White guy, kind of like.
well, the guy that played Han Solo,
I heard he couldn't act. Like, everything I've heard is like he couldn't
Watching
act.
the movie, once you get over the very beginning, realizing it's not Harrison Ford, he does a fine job. Like, there's nothing in that movie. He gets a lot of the cadence down and kind of the Harrison Ford isms. Like, he's not
gruff enough
He's not
either.
doing an impersonation.
Yeah.
He's just kind of taking cues from the way he talks, the way he interacts with stuff. And once you get over the fact that it isn't Harrison Ford, then I didn't really have a hard time getting into it. So he did a good enough job. Like,
He was really funny in that Coen Brothers film.
yeah, Hail Caesar.
Yeah, he was like really good in that, and he played
Yeah.
his role was playing somebody who was a bad actor.
Yeah.
And it was very, very funny.
And then I think it was just that anybody, like, it's one of those kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you get somebody that's essentially just doing an impersonation, then it's just
Yeah.
going to fall flat. And if you get somebody that just, takes some cues but does their own thing, then people are going to get pissed off. So
Well, I think too, though, you look at like who they got for that role. Is not a guy that's like, oh, I want to see that now. Glover as Lando, really
Well, I
interesting.
mean, but here's the thing, though. Who could they have possibly cast as Han Solo?
You
That
don't
was
do
a name.
Han
If
Solo.
you
That-
cast a
that's-
name actor, you just ruin it because
Yeah.
you're just carrying.
Well, the thing is, though, is like with that movie, and I think the box office is going to show it. Nobody really wanted it, so you
mean,
made
it's-
a movie that nobody really
Over
wanted.
the 4-day Memorial Day weekend, it's going to make like $101 million when they had
Yeah.
anticipated it to make, 150 up initially. But so like overall, like Donald Glover as Lando is awesome because he gets like the speech pattern down, all that stuff, and makes it seem effortless. And he plays the character cool. So like I would be interested in seeing that character exist more. But something this movie did, so Emilia Clarke, who's Daenerys on Game of Thrones and was in Terminator Genesis and other things like that. So she plays an original character that hasn't been mentioned in the other Star Wars movies so far. And Kira, I think is her name. And there's a lot of time devoted to her, like really more time with her
cool.
than Chewbacca. But the way it left things off, I'm like, well, why did you devote all this time to this character that we don't know anything about? Like, I get that you have a character that provides some moral grounding or background on why characters are the way they are. But at the same time, like, if you're spending all this time on the backstory of this character that you haven't seen any other Star Wars film and never seen mentioned, it's like, well, they can't be that big of a deal because otherwise you would have heard about them later.
Was she good in this?
I mean, she was good, but it's just the character.
Because did you see Terminator Genesis?
No.
as much as I love her on Game of Thrones, I didn't think she was that great in Terminator.
Yeah.
But I always heard, I heard like how bad the production was on that film. There was, I can't remember the Fantastic Four remake apparently was shooting next door to that.
Yeah.
The most recent one, which was also supposedly a disaster.
Yeah.
That crew knew how bad the Terminator set was, and they had jackets made that said, "At least we're not on Terminator Genesis." Like that's how bad it was.
Well, I know that she had said in a recent interview she was glad the movie didn't do well enough for a sequel.
So I'm not putting that on her, but her performance in that, you know what I mean, made me wonder. Like, I wonder how she's in different roles. Like, she seems made for the Game of Thrones, Daenerys Targaryen or whatever. But
give me my dragons.
Yeah, so that's cool that she did a good job.
And I think something you kind of hit on too. This is something we talked about before podcasts. Is like, even though I really like The Last Jedi, you not so much, I still feel like even though as much as I like that movie, that it did kind of dampen my enthusiasm a little bit, because I'm not that excited for another Star Wars.
I think that The Last Jedi, what it did, not to go too far off course, even
it is relevant.
A lot of people like it, a lot of people disliked it, but I think that it kind of sapped a lot of the enthusiasm from the Star Wars crowd, because at this point you kind of dispense with catching up with any of the old characters, and the new characters is like, is Kylo Ren really that interesting?
I think Kylo Ren is now. Like, that Last Jedi made me more interested in them. Yeah. But it did take like 2 movies. Yeah. The culmination of 2 movies for me to be like, okay, what's going to happen with their relationship?
And now Disney's Disney has a big problem now too, because like Star Wars should actually be bigger than the Marvel stuff. Yeah. But now it's like nothing Star Wars can ever touch.
Well, you had The Force Awakens did so well because I think you had the 30 years of build up looking for an original Star Wars story to be told, and not just the prequels.
And it's not like they haven't made their money back on that investment. You know what I mean? Like they're fine. They can quit making the movies and have made their money back.
I think they miscalculated on what The Last Jedi was going to do to the fan base for Star Wars, because I think they really did turn away a lot of people from the series, or just really dampen their enthusiasm for it.
Yeah, because Star Wars is a more permanent universe.
Because, like, to me, like, a lot of times when you get done watching a movie that's a part of a series or a franchise, it's like, well, how excited are you for the next entry? Like, leaving Infinity War, I was excited to see the next one. Like, Deadpool was excited to see another movie in that universe. With The Last Jedi, when it ended, I was like, well, I really kind of don't care now what happens in these next ones, because they're just going to do a retread of the original series probably, and it's one of those things where, like, we'll just see in the years to come. Like, I guess it's a good thing that the next, like, main Star Wars movie doesn't come out until 2019. So they have a bit of a wait between this one and the next one. So hopefully, I think that'll work in their favor.
Yeah, for sure.
But they have to do a lot of damage control now to people and say, hey, all the stuff you hated we did, we're going to walk that back.
Because, like, the Infinity War left everything, no spoilers. It left everything a lot more shattered than The Last Jedi. But with that is, like, it's in the comic book universe. Everything can kind of be course corrected. Whereas with the Star Wars universe, it's a lot more permanent. So I feel like that going off, and like you said, that kind of leading, because this is going to be the worst Star Wars they've had since Disney, but Disney's only had four Star Wars to come out.
I think another big thing is when you look at The Last Jedi, how much stuff did the director Rian Johnson have to explain after the fact about decisions they made and why it wasn't nonsensical. I think when you have to constantly explain why something makes sense, it didn't make much sense.
Well, and I think there's a bunch of angry Star Wars nerds. But
well, I just to me, it just kind of left me, because I saw it twice. I liked it a little bit more. I liked it more the second time than the first time, but I still was like, I really don't care about Episode 9 now. Like, they've kind of sapped all enthusiasm for it, but with a movie where it's 8 hours of people being followed until their gas runs out, it's like that's. But if you look at how space really works, even if you ran out of fuel, it wouldn't matter because you would be no friction.
It really is a difference. I thought there was a lot of exciting stuff in Last Jedi, but I get that too. Like, for me, it's a difference. Like, is it like it is more of a thinking Star Wars movie than a emotional Star Wars movie? But you know what I mean?
Well, I would say it's more emotional than thinking, because the Empire could have destroyed the rebels at any point during
No. I'm talking about, like, when you think about the themes and, like, the reasons behind, like, when you think about as far as from a perspective on story and what certain things mean and what they're trying to say. You know what I mean? Like, not thinking as far as, like, logistics at all.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, as far as, like, breaking it down and analyzing the reasons behind a lot of things. versus something that's more emotional like The Force Awakens, which rides on a lot of emotion.
They did stuff a lot more for metaphorical meaning than literal meaning.
Yeah, so it's...
But I think that if you don't... I think to a lot of people, the way they executed it killed any of them pulling the meaning out from it.
Yeah.
But
well, I guess my next question is, did Solo give you any enthusiasm going forward? Like, do you want to see... Because we all know where this leads up to. So I think that's something that also dampens this movie a little bit. Because you know the end point.
You don't know... Like, well, you know that Han and Chewie live.
Yeah, I'm saying you know
lives,
Solo's end point. You know Solo's entire journey. You know from here to there what happens.
Well, it looks like they were trying to set it up to be a series of young Solo films.
Yeah.
Which I think they're just going to stretch themselves too thin. And I mean, I think they already have.
Yeah, they made 4 Star Wars films in 4 years, right? I mean, think there was only 6 before that from like 30 years.
I think they would have been much better off if they had pushed Solo from the summer to the winter, because it's less than, it was like 5 months between Star Wars films. And even though Last Jedi did make a lot of money, it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
Well, they were so worried about hitting that date because that's when the original Star Wars premiered. Like it's like I don't make movies. I don't know, but that just seemed like such a dumb,
short-sighted
thing. Like, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, if you are in charge of something that has this much money behind it, you know what I mean? This much power, why put so much other stress and risk on a film just because you think it's cute to release it on the same day that the original premiered? Like, who cares? You know what I mean? There's more to it than that.
Like, being Disney, this is a Disney property. You still have another Disney property in theater currently that's going to hurt your overall value.
Well,
and then you just look at it and it's like there's a lot lined up.
Well,
for
and
this.
in the next, like, so you had Infinity War that's still in theaters. You had Deadpool 2, Solo, and then in a couple weeks you get Jurassic World 2. And then in a few weeks, you get Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Well, no, and before Ant-Man and Wasp, you get another Disney, which is
Incredibles 2. So there's just too much stuff in the
Disney
theaters.
is kind of... With this movie, it's kind of like you threw it in there, and it's not going to be that successful because of your own properties.
So to wrap it up, so Solo, to me, like, it was a solid movie. Like, Ron Howard was the one that they had come in and reshoot it.
Did he narrate any of it?
He did not.
No.
He delivered a competent movie that wasn't bad, it just wasn't super inspiring. And I don't know, like kids are gonna love this movie, because there's, I do enjoy getting away from all the Jedi stuff and the Skywalkers and just having stories that are about people dealing in the universe. But it did feel like they tried to tie it back into other stuff. I'm not sure why they did. So like, it was an enjoyable enough movie. I like Deadpool 2 more. Like Deadpool 2 is like, an 8 or maybe more, and Solo is like a 7. It was enjoyable, nothing earth-shattering, nothing that you have to see to understand the character of Han Solo, really. So that was Solo. It's in theaters. There's a bunch of stuff in theaters now.
Maybe even more.
So then before we moved into Toxic Avenger, so Sean, you have a few...
Yeah, instead of talking about the movies we watched recently, we'll do that on the next one. I didn't mention, I think Silicon Valley and Barry, those ended. Silicon Valley, I think, is still really good. Somebody was talking about it was hitting that loop of them failing upwards constantly, And I don't know if this necessarily does the same thing, but this is maybe minor spoilers for it, but thankfully it doesn't end with them completely at rock bottom again. You know what I mean? A lot of times they get everything stripped from them
and
at
the end of the season. Of hope, and then they build up the next season.
Yes, like it's not a complete reset, thankfully. So it is. There's at least feels like there's some forward movement. Obviously, there's some setbacks, like always, but at least it's not a complete recycle of kind of the, I guess, the patterns of some of the previous seasons. But definitely recommend checking that out. And then Barry 2, which I've seen some people talk about. That is the Bill Hader and Alec Berg, who Alec Berg worked on, Silicon Valley and a bunch of other stuff. A project they did where Bill Hader plays an assassin. He's like ex-military or whatever, or ex-Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. He was a Marine. And so he plays an assassin that's like in LA, and I can't think of his name. The guy that plays Milton from Office Space, and he's in King of the Hill.
Yeah, I'm blanking.
Yes. Anyway, he basically is like his he's the guy that contracts him out.
Yeah.
So he's sort of like his boss. You know what I mean? So they go to do a job in L.A. and he has to kill this guy who is in some acting class, and he ends up like stumbling into this acting class and then realizing he loves acting. So it's about him like, hey, I think I found something I really love and I want to gravitate towards. But also he's got this other stuff going on with these assassinations he's got to do. He wants to get away from that. So it's Henry Winkler's also in it. And I think this is the best Henry Winkler's ever been that I've ever seen him, because it's a good balance of humor, but also having some weight to the story, because this isn't just like a complete, this isn't just like a complete straight comedy. It is very funny, but it's also dark, like pretty dark at times. Like there's some, I haven't seen much of Breaking Bad, but in my mind, it's like, okay, this is like, there'll be some shifts and some things happen that's a couple times it's like pretty dark, and it's like, okay, they're just going there, but there's some weight behind it because it's not all humorous. So that season just ended, and I highly recommend that because it starts off pretty good. Like I was like, oh, I like this, I'll keep watching it. But by the end, I think it was like, ended phenomenally. And it's not just the last episode, like probably about 4 episodes in, I really started getting into it. So I really highly recommend that. And I think there may be more seasons of that.
And Stephen Root.
Yes. He's great in it as well. There's
Stapler.
a lot of good people. It's got a really great cast, and definitely check out Barry.
All right. So now moving to our discussion of the Toxic Avenger from 1984. And this is a movie that I think I watched on YouTube. Like, it's out there a lot of places.
It's on Prime, too.
Yeah, because Troma on their YouTube channel, I think, has all of the movies that aren't their newest release. And if you're not aware of what the story... We'll do full spoilers throughout. I mean, it's a hard movie to spoil. It's basically... So the synopsis from IMDb... Tromaville has a monstrous new hero. The Toxic Avenger is born when meek mop boy Melvin falls into a vat of toxic waste. Now evildoers will have a lot to lose. So that's the basic synopsis. It's basically the janitor for a health club or a gym/pool falls in a vat of chemical waste and then starts killing criminals. And there's people that play a game of and they're in cars. They assign points based on who they run over and kill and how they do it. And he eventually clashes with this group, and it has a lot of really like in the gyms in the 80s. Did dudes really wear just like thongs? And women did wear the unitards or the one piece things that essentially only covered like their labia and their nipples, and that was really the only thing they covered. Like women did wear that, unfortunately.
Is that the first time anybody's ever said labia on the podcast? And
the vulva.
100 and how many ever episodes?
It barely covers the vulva. But
one labia.
But it's just one of those things where you have like a lot of kind of cheesy elements like that.
It's very 80s.
It is very, very 80s. And it has that kind of over-the-top acting style. But the thing is, though, watching this, the actors who play like the quote-unquote teens or the young people, they would not be out of place in Friday the 13th, part 3 or something like that.
Absolutely not. Yeah, they fit right
They're
in.
very much in line with kind of what a lot of those 80 movies were doing. Like something like this and Return of the Living Dead could be a good double bill. Mm-hmm. Just stuff that has like that same type of feel from the 80s. In terms of its low budget. And low budget in the 80s is different than low budget now. Because, in the 80s, you see the movie is like a $500,000.
I think I read that $500,000 or 600,000, something like that.
So, for that same amount of budget today, I think you can make a lot more movie or something that looks a lot more cinematic, just because technology's progressed enough and things are, cheaper to make.
Or if they're not cheaper to make, there's so much more. Like you can go online and figure out how to do a lot of the.
Because if you made a movie in the 1980s for $10,000, and you didn't already have access to equipment.
Yeah.
If you're shooting something on video, it just looks bad and it doesn't look good 20 years later. But like this movie, you can tell there's definitely low budget trappings to it, but it doesn't. The transfer's pretty good. And it's still something you can watch and enjoy. And it's not, because what was it? We've mentioned it a bunch of times, like Prom Night. The transfer on that is terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I think there are better transfers that, Scream Factory Arrow or somebody's released where they cleaned up, from the masters. But, Toxic Avenger, for it to be a low budget movie, it still looks good and clean. And it's very much all those movies take place in like the Tromaville and stuff like that. Like it's like experience of trauma movies. Have any of us like watched a bunch of trauma movies or other ones?
This is a movie like when I was younger, I used to go to the Riot Skate Park, and I feel like this was the movie they always had like movies they would have in one room playing.
Yeah,
this was always one of the I think it was on. I never really watched it.
Yeah,
so I've seen bits and pieces of it over the years. This is probably really the only. I probably have seen all of them at some point or most of them.
Yeah,
but. That's about the only because what all is in the Tromaville scope? Like, is it just the Toxic Avenger?
No, the Class of Nukem High, Sergeant Kabuki Man.
Yeah, okay, I've seen Class
Sergeant Kabuki Man, which they said, hey, it's the Kabuki Man in Toxic Avenger 2. So I think they have a weird, I don't say weird, but almost an obvious affinity for Japanese culture.
Yeah.
Just because even that first one, like there's some samurai swords on the wall in the Mexican place, the restaurant,
Yeah.
And then the sequel, he goes to Japan, and they are straight up in Japan for a very long time, and it's not even like a lot of films that take place in Japan. Let's just compare Toxic Avenger 2 to, say, Skyfall or something. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's Japan or Korea.
Or The Wolverine.
Yes. Well, The Wolverine even shows more of it. But even like Skyfall, it's like they're in Japan, but really they're in a building. And you know what I mean?
Never
like, you don't
really even know it.
This is literally him going to Japan looking for his father. And he goes up to like a cart and they're making food, and they show how they're making this special treat. You know what I mean? Like he spends a lot of time wandering around, and it's like the filmmakers wanted to go to Japan and they almost shot it like a travel documentary. Like they just show tons of Japan. The story isn't moving forward at all. It's just Toxic Avenger running around and like, you know what I mean? Like,
so this is like what we really wanted to see when like Jason went to Manhattan. Just like him interacting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, really, that should have been Toxic Goes to Japan.
Yeah.
It would have been a huge payoff. But yeah, it's, I don't know. These films were so weird too, because obviously it doesn't handle even the Japanese stuff with grace as far as being inoffensive, because like the Toxic Avenger series and part 1 especially, it's like anything goes.
Yeah.
Pointing guns at babies, which apparently that guy quit after that. Yeah. After he had to do that, shooting guide dogs.
Yeah, shooting a seeing eye dog. Because like a lot of times it's something that in modern day movies and shows I get kind of annoyed with is so many movies and shows resort to rape or the threat of rape as like a driving force for tension and dramatic scenes and character growth and all this stuff. And it just gets like in today's world, it's like you can find something that's not as, that's super prevalent in the real world for people to experience assault. So you can probably find something else to up the stakes. It doesn't just have to resort to rape for everything. And that's in modern day movies. You watch old movies, like 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, and it's like the motivating thing in everything. So in Toxic Avenger, luckily it doesn't actually happen. It's just threatened to happen and then get stopped.
And the tone of this is like slapstick comedy. So it's not like they're trying to milk trauma in a certain way.
Yeah, there's
to build,
really no
and they're not
dramatic-
trying to like pull any sort of emotion out of the audience from
It's just showing how bad these criminals are because they shoot a seeing eye dog and then they're gonna rape the blind girl whose dog it was. And then just when Toxie comes in and rips off arms and beats people to death, you're like, oh, okay, well, just keep going. Just blow them up into like goo.
Make an ice cream out of his face. That's the thing too. Like, this film, a lot of these 80s films, like the slashers and stuff, I don't know if it's because we watched a lot of them over the past few years. Like sometimes I just get tired. I'm like, okay, this is just, there's like a couple gleaming moments. Like and a lot of people are into those because they are certain moments of their childhood, or hey, I love this one scene. This film at least goes. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like you can turn it at any point and be like, this scene is crazy. Literally like almost any point of the movie. And it's, like Deadpool, like there's tons of quips. This is like tons of just the most insane stuff over and over and over.
Which is kind of like, it's almost to me kind of remind me like some Family Guy stuff, because I'm sure Family Guy's pulled from this. Yeah. But so you watch, like, because this movie wasn't afraid to go a lot of places.
No, yeah.
And I think that's how it kind of makes it fun, because like even in Friday the 13th, like there was like some.
They take it too seriously.
They take
You know,
it too
almost,
seriously.
yeah.
But yeah, where this one, it's like, yeah, shoot the.
Well, in this movie,
scene out, though.
and you know, early on in the movie, you have him run over a kid and go back and run over and blow up his head.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like it's
Well,
ridiculous.
and two, like when he falls into the vat. This I was reading something about the making of, or I don't know, but you know, somebody brought up a good point. I think it was on the AV Club. It's talking about the dudes doing coke,
Yeah.
driving the truck, and it's it's like even the margins have been packed with depravity for its own sake, and that's what it is. Like any little side character is
Yeah.
only doing something crazy or has a weird moment. Like
Yeah.
everybody has something weird to do in this movie.
Like, as it shows almost nobody in the movie until kind of like the end stuff or like Melvin's mom or something. There's almost no character that's not like a terrible person.
yeah,
And then there's elements like
it's either victims or terrible people. Most
Yeah, and what's funny too is like the robbers have kind of like a wannabe Clockwork Orange going thing. Thing going on. Like the one guy's got his face painted, and you know,
cigar face.
yeah, and you have the thing with like Toxie where you don't really see his face until kind of the back half of the movie, or because there's up until a certain point he's just shot from behind the entire time. And I guess that was partially just to for time and money, just to not have to show the prosthetic on the face.
And it almost did keep you engaged, like, ooh, I want to see, his face.
Yeah.
And two, they don't call him in this film. They don't, aside from the narrator, I think they don't call him Toxic Avenger or Toxie or anything,
Yeah.
because they didn't know why they were making the film. That's why the shirt says like, I love
The monster.
the monster hero or whatever like
Yeah.
that. Because they didn't really, they didn't know yet.
So they shot. Yeah, they kind of liked it though. It's like, yeah, we don't know what he's gonna call. We're just gonna.
He was
shoot
very
him.
much more of a character in the second one and the Toxic Crusaders. Like he had the mop as his defining weapon, and he was known as the Toxic Avenger.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is like almost like a Friday the 13th, where it's like they really don't know what they're doing with it yet. Like the first Friday the 13th or the second one.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't know what we're doing yet, and they almost like they fall into it, sort of.
Yeah, because like in the movie, like the over-the-top gore, some of it would look good, some of it looked kind of cheesy. I mean, like the overall movie was meant to be kind of cheesy.
Yeah, it was different.
So I think any of those types of things just kind of add to the charm, and the acting, like Melvin, like his acting. Like, is that one of those guys where they make their living off of convention appearances or something anymore?
I don't know. I have never seen him around that I know of.
All I know is his IMDb profile picture showed him holding the mop, like current day.
Yeah, that I'm sure. Probably up around New Jersey.
But yeah, all those movies like the Lloyd Kaufman, Truman movies, because I'd also watch like Class of Nukem High and some other stuff. Like the newer stuff, I'm not as much of a fan of. Because I'm not really a fan of like modern day faux exploitation schlocky movies where people are running around in digital cameras, like modern day equipment, shooting movies that are just ridiculous, over the top exploitation style stuff. Like that's not really things that I'm into. Because like the Toxic Avenger felt like a certain amount of earned charm for what it's doing, and it feels like things that are made today that just try to ape that come off as disingenuous.
Well, yeah, because like I think it's kind of hard. Like sometimes, not that this movie's like magic or anything, but they kind of capture a little bit of something. Just like with the Friday.
Well, there was no
Nightmare.
precedent really.
Yeah,
You know what I
there's
mean?
no
Like it
precedent.
was just very like a weird horror comedy kind of that. There wasn't really many in this vein before.
Yeah.
Now we have all those to draw on, and the other ones feel just like retreads. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Well, I kind of like this because it's almost like, what if Jason was not a
Well, and two, it's
murderous
also the element
villain.
of at that point in
still
time,
murders
that's
people.
before the Tim Burton Batman movies.
Yeah.
The only superhero movie you really had was the Superman films. At that point, I think there have been 2 of them or 3, and you had those, and then you had like TV shows like Wonder Woman or Incredible Hulk or things like that. But like superheroes were part of culture, but not as ingrained in culture as they are today.
Yeah.
So it felt like, the 80s and 90s had a lot of things that were like superhero adjacent properties, but they didn't want to go full on in that because it was still seen as cheesy. So they found like, Toxic Avenger had the hero was a deformed monster and who brutally murdered people in very gory ways. Yeah.
and the sequel sets up that he basically has, like the midichlorians from Star Wars. He basically has, I don't know what they're called. There's something like trauma lights or something like that. They're essentially like these little things in his body, and that's what is his radar for detecting criminal activities. And stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have like things like that. They're just, and that entire movie firmly has its tongue in its cheek. So any direction it kind of goes, like you're not questioning how the Toxic Avenger just shows up when there's crime happening in the first one. It's just like, well, otherwise there is no movie if he just, is just running around from point A to point B.
I kind of would almost want to see him do that and just beat people up along the way.
There's one thing in it that I thought was just hilarious when I was watching it. So when Toxie and his girlfriend, I'm already forgetting her name, when like they're staying in the tent and they're trying to find him towards the end, and it's like the mayor and everybody's watching and they're looking at binoculars. The girlfriend's wearing like a very skimpy bikini. He's like, oh, he's got a bimbo in there. And I was just like, that's so out of place. And it's like, why was she wearing a bikini? For what reason? So that part I just thought was funny. I mean, it's one of those things where those movies weren't meant to be PC or anything like that, because that was really before that was even a kind of conscious wave of things.
Yeah.
And Lee Coffin's always talked about his movies, like about the girls and the gore and all that stuff. So I think
he's the Hugh Hefner of exploitation.
Yeah.
Films,
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where when you see him in interviews or see him on different, see a picture of him, he's usually wearing like a bow tie and stuff like that. He seems like somebody that would hang out with like Bill Nye the Science Guy and do like zany, like, Weird Al type stuff.
Very animated.
Because I was thinking like, what was it, Weird Al's movie, UHF or VHS?
Yeah.
It feels like he would do stuff like that. And
It does feel kind of...
And then you see the actual movie and it's like, oh, there's boobs everywhere. And, Well, in Toxic Avenger, though, it did have people wearing like skimpy outfits, but it only really had like the one girl showing her boobs, if I remember correctly. Or there wasn't much.
Marissa Tomei shows up in this too.
Yeah.
Apparently she like runs in whenever they're in the health club. And Toxie's in there. But before this, I think Trauma did 2 sex comedies. So it makes sense. And they kind of, were, I guess, fairly successful. And then before that, they were like co-producing some films. Like they did one with like, what was it, Michael Douglas, I think. And like, they were on their way, and which was like a serious film.
Yeah.
And I think they were like, oh no, we want to just make what we want to make, instead of working with other studios and big talent. Like,
well, too, a lot of people have come out of the ranks of Troma because James Gunn, who's done the Guardians of the Galaxy and all that stuff, he was, he worked on Troma films before he got into, being his own feature director of bigger movies. And there's a lot of people that have come through that area. And like in modern day movies, like, Toxic Avenger was not really exploitation. It was just goofiness. But there's a lot of people now who make like the faux trauma, faux exploitation movie stuff. And it's just so funny. Like the things that people are like, oh, well, if this scene doesn't have nudity in it, it strips it of all power and meaning. If you don't see the nipples, it's pointless. And it's like, okay, so we got the scene set. We've convinced the actors to do the nudity. Bring in the ghost clown, and bring in the werewolf baby, and make sure that they have a big penis knife. So it's like, in modern day context, when people make all this schlocky stuff and take it, 3 steps further just because they try to make it shocking enough to get attention, like Toxic Avenger didn't really have much exploitation style stuff. Like it did have, there's a little bit of equal opportunity because, like I said, it had like dudes wearing like thongs at the gym.
Yeah, there's a lot of cross dressing in these films. Which I don't know if it's just supposed to be for humor or what. Yeah, it's actually like, obviously if you talk to, I'm sure a lot of the, like Kaufman in them, you could pin it down. But watching the film, it's never clear, like, okay, are they trying to be derogatory towards any certain, like, you don't know because it is just so much insanity on screen. Or it's easy to look it all over and be like, look, just, it is what it is.
I mean, like, so was that character choices that the actors decided they wanted to do themselves? Yeah. Or is it just, he's like, it'd be funny if we see like a dude's ass over here, so go wear this instead.
No, there's more of that in part 2.
Yeah.
Guys, but now they're in Japan.
Is it when he's in Japan doing normal stuff?
So there's Japanese guys dressed up like Japanese women showing their ass.
Like he's just getting some food and you see somebody's butt.
So there's just a lot of kind of stuff where you're just like, oh, like it's just there for weird set dressing maybe. And I did like that the restaurant that they go into and there's that robbery that happens is like a taco place.
Yeah.
Because it just reminded me like a Taco Tico or something.
Yeah.
Which
Or
still exists.
or La Bamba's on Bardstown Road. That's what
Yeah.
reminded me of La Bamba's. And then I love all the detectives. They intentionally had them all eating tacos. Like,
Yeah.
well, look what I got over here. And then they're like eating the taco.
Yeah, I don't think I would be eating tacos from a kitchen where people just brutally murdered and had their hands and face burned in like the cooking oil and stuff. But
Yeah, I mean, the Melvin at the start of this is, he's a little annoying to watch.
Yeah.
Because he's so over the top. But really, once we get into Toxie, like, this is for me way more enjoyable than a lot of slashers from the era. You know what I mean? At least there's some stuff going on, and it's not. It's like some people made slashers because they wanted to get a few kills on screen.
Yeah.
And then they just were writing characters to fill the time. You know what I mean? This, at least, even if the jokes are the dumbest jokes possible, they at least put them, they at least like try to put some on screen.
Well, there's so much volume, I think, sometimes too.
Exactly.
That's where it almost feels like Family Guy to me. Because
Yeah.
it's just like, there's going to be a lot of stuff that is going to work, and then there's going to be some stuff that is not going to
Yeah.
work, but they don't care because it's just on to the
Well,
next
then,
thing.
like,
It's like, okay, they didn't work. Here we go. Here's another.
you have like where Toxie becomes like a local hero. And then at the end of the movie, when they track down where he's at and they're going to kill him, like the mayor because he's a criminal, then all the people come to his defense, and then he's able to go kill the mayor or whatever in front of
Was it
everybody.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, and he goes and like,
No,
he
Mr. Mayor.
He punches him in the stomach and pulls guts out.
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, to the rest of the people though, if they don't know the mayor's a criminal,
Yeah,
this
just
guy
like he
just
murdered the
disemboweled the mayor.
Everybody's like, yay!
So, but it's that goofy logic where it's like, okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
okay, whatever.
And I think too, like I was reading something where in the late '80s, early '90s, New Line Cinema had gotten rights to the Toxic Avenger to do like a higher budget reboot as a hedge against the Ninja Turtles. If they had problems with negotiating the rights on that, they'd be like, well, if we can't make the Turtles movies, we're just going to go and do the Toxic Avenger movie and make it the exact same thing and just use these characters and accomplish a similar thing.
Apparently, in the later films, like Toxie has an evil twin,
Yeah.
and he showed up in the 2012 Ninja Turtle TV series.
Yeah.
The evil twin did for some weird reason, like.
Because I think that New Line eventually, I think that Troma did eventually sue them and win some
Yeah.
monetary damages because they just used it as a hedge and didn't have any
Yeah.
plan to make it.
Yeah.
But you're saying that, I kind of remember, maybe it's just the Toxic Avenger Crusaders, whatever it is, those toys were made by the same company as Ninja Turtles,
Yeah.
but I remember them being very similar.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking of the right
Well,
one.
you had so in a run of time, you had a number of characters that are created by Toxic Ooze. You had the Turtles, you had Toxic Avenger, and then you had shows like Captain America and the Planeteers are very much about environmental issues.
Captain
You
Planet.
had- or what did I say?
Captain America. I was like,
Not
what?
Captain America, Captain
Don't-
Planet and the Planeteers. Then you had Fern Gully, which was like the big animated movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you had a bunch of stuff in like the 80s, 90s that were about toxic waste or pollution and about being environmentally conscious. And
Do you remember the like Trash Man or whatever Ninja Turtle action figure? He felt like almost a Toxie ripoff.
Well, I'm saying there's there's a lot of stuff that were, and maybe those toys are manufactured probably by the same company.
Playmates, probably.
Yeah, but I just remember them being very similar because it's one of those things you see and it's like, oh, and maybe I'm wrong. But
because I
feel like
looked
they're
up
the
on
same.
YouTube the commercial for some of the action figures. It's like, oh, I'll remember those.
Yeah.
I don't know that I had many.
I
of them,
had
but-
the Toxic Avenger. I had one of Toxie, and then the first time I watched this was in a hospital in the waiting room. They had Toxic Avenger 2 on, and it was a scene where he's like about to fight a guy. He crushes him into a ball, and then like does a layup or dunks him into a basket. And I was
Yeah.
like, all right. I mean, I was probably like 4. Like I have faint memories of it, and I'm like, okay, I'm into this. Which is a weird movie to be playing in a hospital waiting
Yeah.
room. But I think it was just, on cable a lot then.
Yeah.
So after that, I was like, I'm in on this. And that's when I got the action figures and started watching the cartoon, and then like would occasionally see the movies on TV.
Yeah, those are the exact same.
Yeah,
as-
like I remember those action figures.
Yeah, and here's Here's the old Muckman. I had that one too.
Yeah.
And you pour ooze in him, which is sort of a Toxie ripoff.
Yeah, so great for the listeners. There was the Swamp Thing, like TV show and cartoon.
Yeah, I love the TV show.
So like Swamp Thing, like I think like Toxic Avenger and Swamp Thing would be a good like double bill. I keep talking about double bills, but like stuff you could show people like in a weekend. You could have like Toxic Avenger, Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing's a little slow in spots. I like Swamp Thing a lot.
Yeah.
It's a little slow in spots, but I hope they wasn't somebody attached to making a new one of those?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think they were talking about it recently and being like a little dark, you know what I mean? Like not quite horror maybe, but yeah, I love Swamp Thing and the USA TV show.
Yeah, so Swamp Thing, like, and that's something I remember as a kid, because they all just like emitted a certain feel that you don't get from a lot of things now. You know, it was also because I was a kid, so when you watch things like that, so
Alex Garland, the guy who made Annihilation, a Swamp Thing movie is on his wish list, and that was posted this year in February.
So maybe Alex Garland of Ex Machina and Annihilation, and also a writer of 28 Days Later and Sunshine, can make a Swamp Thing.
That's
movie.
right. He's supposed to be a part of Justice League Dark.
Yeah,
if that was going to happen, or if it does happen, which I don't know.
I think that's decreasing by the. I think when Aquaman comes out, it makes $5 this year.
Well, there's Aquaman and Shazam's already been shot.
Man,
and that's from the director who did Lights Out and Annabelle Creation, David F. Sandberg, who I think is a talented director. So we'll see what he does with it.
I just think that like the property that's going to destroy everything will be DC.
But I think that like Shazam is where it's a kid that turns into a superhero, so that's like a more lighthearted tone, which would be the lightest thing DC has done. So we'll have to see how that goes. But you know, back to the Toxic Avenger. So we're just talking about, like, you know, for the episode and reviewing like the first one. But I think you can watch most of them on Amazon Prime or YouTube because they're all out there to watch legally for free. So I guess we can wrap up our discussion and give it a review. So Sean, what would you give?
I don't know, man. I really enjoy it. Like probably, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad this movie exists. I've give it a 7, maybe 8. You know what I mean? Like as far as just pure enjoyment. Like and too, like I liked it as a kid. So somewhere around there.
Like this is one of those movies that you kind of forget about because it's not like if I was gonna people over like. Why this is? I enjoy this more than like the Friday 13th. I don't enjoy it more than the Nightmare on Elm Street. But like, if there was like a group of people I had over my house, you could definitely like for Halloween or something weird. Like, we always talk about this. It's like you could show this to a group of people and keep them entertained because not everything's gonna land. But it feels a lot
absurd.
It's so absurd, and like if you like the Family Guy style of humor or Deadpool or something like that, where it's like not everything's gonna work for everybody, but there's so much volume and it doesn't stop.
And I'm sure you can make a good drinking game out of it.
Yeah, you could, and it's just like the deaths are ridiculous because like this actually has a bunch of crazy ridiculous deaths that they show, whereas a lot of the Friday 13th and Halloween's do not. Even in the later ones, they don't show anything.
I think I saw there was like 27 deaths in this one.
Yeah. You know? And it's like you go, when people talk about how like Friday 13th, it's like a lot of times they faded to white.
Yeah.
Or if they do it, it's implied. It's never really shown. You need a couple times you see stuff.
I think this holds up better than some of those Friday 13th in that regard, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. And I think too, like it's so like just insane that it's entertaining almost, you know, as long as you got the right group. I'm with you. You know, a 7 or 8. I mean, I'll go 7.5.
Well, I mean, like I would agree too. Like I think when you view it through the lens of nostalgia and all that stuff, you know, it's like an 8. If you view it just in terms of a pure movie shown to a new audience that has no connection to the property whatsoever, I could see it being a 4 or a 3.
Just when he disembowels the mayor.
But in terms of like good. Viewing it through the lens of which a lot of people from our generation view it, because when they saw it and they had the cartoon and just a lot of things from that era, like Swamp, like I said, like, you know, like Swamp Thing and Turtles and all that stuff kind of has some similar elements.
Yeah.
Then, you know, through that lens, a lot of people from our generation, you know, are going to give, you know, if you're even rating it, they just have affinity for it. But if you show it to somebody that's fresh and is not really into this stuff and is into, if you were to show this to a group of like 18-year-olds today or 17-year-olds, they're probably like,
some would like it, but
like kids whose favorite shows or YouTubers doing reaction videos about trailers,
which is stuff I just can't.
Which we're about to start doing. So we're going to do reactions to popular YouTuber reactions about trailer. No, actually, we're not.
No, that's like an entire thing I just don't understand.
But yeah, so all of us, it seems like we have, nostalgia for that movie and that era and that type of stuff.
I also think you saw it at a hospital.
Yeah, I remember specifically that basketball scene.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I think my great grandpa was having surgery or something. We were in the waiting room, and I was like, just seeing something like that on screen. Like the film too, it's basically a live action cartoon. That's why they made it a cartoon.
Well, I just want to know why was it on cable TV or is it something they put
I think it was on cable TV.
Okay,
No, the doctors all watch it.
Yeah, the doctors are
But
watching.
yeah, it was a big waiting room, so a lot of people could see the TV.
Yeah, I
it was
love it.
huge. It was at the hospital.
Yeah,
it wasn't
I
like a
love it.
doctor's office. And I just remember him balling that guy up and slamming. And I was like, wow, this is like made for me. Like I was probably,
yeah, he's like
6 years old.
At least where I could watch it made sense at like a skate park, where it's like that's something you would imagine.
Well, there's
but
a
just
lot of
being in the hospital.
There's a lot of stuff that like was all about basketball. Like, was it Escape from LA where Snake has to hit all these like shots?
Yeah, but
so basketball was like a big thing in movies for like a few years.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably also like right around the Jordan boom and the shoes and like all that. 'Cause if it was in the mid '80s,
all these movies, but
Yeah. Early 90s at Chicago Bulls.
yeah, so that'll wrap up our discussion of the Toxic Avenger. Not all the things I incorrectly called it earlier.
Atomic Avenger. I messed up and called it the Atomic Avenger,
But,
and you whatever.
Yeah, so if
Atomic Crusader.
you're listening to the podcast via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor and leave a review there. It helps other people find the podcast. You can find all the things we're doing at houseofvideostore.com. There's links there to all the things we're doing: short films, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Subscribe to us at all those places. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on, well, I don't know. Actually, I think I probably use Instagram way more, and it's just the William Cap. So I use Instagram way more than Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Twitter. I don't post anything other than X-Men stuff on it. So if you're not interested in that, but my Instagram's at MetaWorldDerek.
But you should just make an X-Men account.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you should.
Yeah.
You might get some followers. and
Yeah,
stuff.
probably.
And then you change it into HBTVS.
Once you get 'em in.
I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll bring this episode of the House of Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.